I bought the bungalow because it felt honest. Small, square rooms, nothing fancy, a little slouch in the roofline that gave it personality. Corner lot in Portland, 2023, walkable coffee, buses that actually show up. I'm a graphic designer. My days are grids and pixels, so my house has to be tidy or my brain gets static. I labeled my moving boxes with masking tape and never took the labels off in case I reorganize, which I won't. There's leftover green curry in the fridge because I always think future me wants a late-night snack. A dented watering can lives by the back steps. A yard sale rescue I keep meaning to repaint and never do. Nights, I do a lap. Stove knobs, outlets, back door, bedroom window. The sash on that window sticks a little, so I push it down hard, click the lock, and set one of those cheap contact sensors I bought in a 6-pack. I angle the blinds so if someone looks in from the street, all they see is slats and a triangle of wall. It makes me feel like I'm smarter than whoever's out there, even if whoever is probably just raccoons. 3 mornings in a row, the same thing. The bedroom window is just barely up. Not open, more like a breath. Enough that the contact sensor light is red instead of green. The screen is still seated, the lock still flipped down like I left it. I told myself it was settling, humidity, whatever. Then I noticed the chalk marks I drew on the frame when I moved in. 2 little white dashes to show where the sashes meet didn't line up anymore. Maybe I moved them. Maybe it was my sleep brain. You can talk yourself into anything when it's daylight. Because I make a living checking things twice, I set up a test. I tore a slip off a receipt and taped it across the seam, half on the top sash, half on the bottom. I took a photo so I wouldn't second-guess my memory. I slept fine. In the morning, the paper was torn down the middle. The app that logs my contact sensors showed nothing because apparently the 6-pack is only good at boasting it's connected, not doing the one job it promised. Outside, below the bedroom window, I keep mulch around a scraggly hydrangea. That 3rd morning, the mulch looked dented, like something pressed in and sprang back. The sill had a faint smear of yellowish dust. It's Portland. Everything gets a dusting of pollen. But the smear had the shape of 4 fingertips if you squinted. I didn't want to squint, so I turned away and watered the hydrangea. By that point, I'd earned the right to be a little paranoid, so I went to the hardware store and bought a sash pin and a cheap wedge. The pin goes through both sashes. The wedge jams in the track for backup. Belt and suspenders. I also ordered a battery camera for the inside, facing the window. I mounted it on the curtain rod and ran the app. I moved my side of the bed so I could sleep facing the window. Felt silly and necessary at the same time. That first night with the new setup, I lay there and listened to the house. Baseboard heat ticking as it cooled, a distant garbage truck, 2 raccoons having a conversation like cranky neighbors. I watched the window until my eyes did that floaty thing they do when you've stared too long. At some point, I drifted off. In the morning, the wedge was still snug, the pin still in. The contact sensor light was green. I made coffee and opened the camera footage while the kettle hummed. At 2:43 a.m., the camera picked something up. The picture doesn't do well with low light. It grained everything into gray. I watched a hand appear at the seam from the outside, like it rose from the sill. Something thin looped around them and worked at the crack where the sashes meet. The sash pin wobbled. It shouldn't wobble. The hand eased a wire down, nudged, then the pin slid just enough to catch the lower sash on slack. The wedge held. The hand withdrew. Then nothing, except a shape right at the glass. Shoulders, no flashlight, no phone glow. The silhouette didn't move for maybe a full minute, just stood there, facing in. I thought I'd cry or throw up. Instead, I took screenshots. I told myself that meant I was handling it. That day, I added a second wedge, repositioned the pin, and put fresh masking tape marks where everything met. I even taped another receipt to the seam because part of me wanted to catch him again, as if collecting evidence could make anything about this feel controllable. The next night was humid, a film on the air, the kind that makes wood complain. I left the fan on a low whir and lay there pinned to the mattress by the kind of tired that looks like sleep but isn't. Sometime after 2, I heard a small rasp. Not loud. Then the faintest scrape and the soft pop that a screen makes when someone eases it out of a track without letting it spring. I watched the window. The screen edged inward. A hand came first, then the crown of a head. He lifted himself like he'd done it 100 times. Knee to sill, wrist on the lower rail, a small grunt he tried to swallow. We stared at each other at the same eye level. I screamed without planning to. It came out raw and ugly, not cinematic. It filled the room and probably half the block. His face went flat like he'd been slapped by sound. He didn't argue or shush me. He didn't say anything at all. He let go. His weight left the sill and the screen, and he dropped into the dark. You could hear the mulch go thunk when he landed, then scrambling, fast, the sound of someone who knows the yard. I called 911 and said all the sentences you're supposed to say. I'm safe inside. He ran. No weapon that I saw. The police walked the yard with flashlights and came inside to look at the footage. They were tired and nice. In the mulch below the window, they found a heel print planted in exactly the part of the bed that always looks kicked up. One officer looked at the print and said, "You weren't imagining it," not like a question. For the rest of that night, I couldn't make my body lie still, so I made lists. Keyed sash lock, internal wooden stopper. Second camera facing the yard instead of the window. Trim back the hydrangea so there's nothing to hide behind. Tell my neighbor with the dog. Sleep at my friend's? I ended up on the couch with all the lights on, pretending the glow was making the house safer instead of just showing it off. 2 days later, my realtor called. He started with, "Are you okay?" which is a frightening way to begin. Apparently, the previous owner had reached out after hearing what happened. Her ex-husband had just been released from prison. He'd done time for domestic violence, and before that, this house had been theirs. He didn't know she'd sold it, didn't know she'd moved. The realtor apologized for not telling me sooner, but technically, there'd been no legal obligation. He probably just thought he was coming home, he said. He sounded defensive and guilty at the same time, which is a trick I didn't know voices could do. I spent that afternoon at the hardware store again. Internal stopper, a block of hardwood cut to length, painted to match the trim so it doesn't make me feel like I live in a barricade. Keyed sash lock that can't be jimmied with a wire. I installed a second camera outside, aimed down at the mulch and the slope of the yard, more useful than staring at my own glass. At night, I checked the feeds too often. The app showed me a neat timeline of all quiet that looked like control, even though it wasn't. To this day, the cameras just send me boring updates, which is good. I rolled a towel and tucked it tight into the track. It's for drafts, I told myself. It's practical. But when my hand pressed the towel down, what I was really doing was giving myself something to push against if a wire loop ever slid between the sashes again. I rent a 2-room place in Raleigh behind a dentist's office. Not much to brag about. Thin walls, a window unit that thinks it's a philosopher, and floors that complain when the weather changes. I work nights at a salon, so I'm on a vampire schedule. Get home around 10, eat something quick, shower, try not to wake the neighbors. Dinner is usually a breakfast burrito I reheat in the pan because I like the tortillas a little crisp. I keep my tips in a mason jar in the bedroom closet behind a shoe rack because who's going to look there besides me? The smell started on a Tuesday night. I was closing the closet after grabbing a sweatshirt and something hit me in the face. Plastic left on a dashboard. Warm and sour. Didn't feel like danger. More like the air had a past. I pulled everything out. The hamper, a tote bag with winter scarves, a box of old flat irons that still work if you jiggle the cord. I sniffed the shoes like a weirdo. Nothing obvious. I sprinkled baking soda, put a bowl of coffee grounds on the shelf because I read that on the internet and called it handled. Next night, the smell got stronger, and it wasn't there during the day. I checked before work. Nothing. Only at night, and only when the closet door was shut. That pissed me off in a petty way, like the smell was doing it on purpose. I washed everything I could fit in the machine, flipped the mattress just in case, even swapped the hamper for a new one from the grocery store. I remember thinking this was just old house nonsense, The kind you brag about later when you're pretending you like quirky things. On Thursday, I noticed the air moving. The closet has a piece of metal register on the back wall, painted the same off-white as everything else. My place doesn't have floor vents. Heat comes from the baseboards, and the AC is in the window. But when I held my palm near that little register, the air felt warm. Not strong, just a soft exhale, like the wall had lungs. I turned off every fan and the AC. I shut the bedroom door and stood in the dark with my phone flashlight off. The smell got heavier. I clicked the light on and aimed it through the register's little slots. Past the dust and paint drips, I saw black space. Not ductwork. A gap. It looked like a shallow cave, the kind kids dig in snowbanks. I didn't sleep much that night. I set the chain on the door and put a chair under the knob anyway, which was dramatic, but made my body settle. I fell out around 2 and woke at 5 to a knock next door and somebody's dog complaining once. By Friday morning, I had talked myself into it being an old vent to nowhere. I took out the 2 screws I could reach. The other ones were buried under paint and pried with a butter knife. The metal popped. I leaned in and angled my flashlight. Behind the drywall lip, there was a thin mattress rolled tight. 2 grocery store water bottles with the label peeled. A nest of instant noodle packets, the cheap kind with neon seasoning. A tea light sitting in a wax ring. A flannel shirt. And on the far drywall, pencil lines at eye level. A row of hash marks grouped by 5s. I sat on the floor with my hands on my knees and just looked at it. My first thought, this is embarrassing, was whether I'd inhaled something dumb at work and was imagining it. I touched the mattress and came away with gray dust along the seam. It stuck to my finger like someone's skin had shed there a while. I called the non-emergency number. The dispatcher asked if anyone was inside. No, I said, and realized I wasn't positive. The officer who showed up was young enough to make me feel old. He took pictures, wrote down what I said, shined his flashlight through the gap a few extra seconds. He didn't look surprised. He said to leave it alone and get a contractor to seal it. He radioed a case number and gave me a card with the number handwritten again on the back, like I might forget. I texted my friend Cammie a photo of the register. Not the inside, I'm not completely reckless, and told her I had to call a handyman. She sent back 10 skull emojis and, "Girl, I'm coming over," which is why she wins at being a person. I found a handyman online with next day availability. The owner's voice was too chipper for the situation. "Bonus square footage," he joked when I explained the void. And then he did that thing where someone laughs at their own joke and realizes midway it was not a great read on the room. He said he'd come by after his morning drywall patch. I stuffed a towel in the closet door frame that night. Like that would matter. I locked the chain, shifted the couch to see the front door, and scrolled nonsense until my eyes got sandy. Around midnight, I slept. The apartment felt emptier than usual, which is a trick of nerves. At 11:47 p.m., someone pounded on the front door, hard enough to make the peephole rattle. I sat up so fast the couch springs complained out loud. The knocks came again, then again. A man's voice came through the wood. "You took my bed." A pause like he wanted me to answer. "I sleep there." Another pause. "You stole my pillow." I didn't go near the door. I kept my phone on speaker and dialed 911 while I stood in the hall where the chain's shadow fell across the wall. "I already called them," I said, loud enough for the door. "Please leave." He didn't swear. He didn't shout. He said, almost mild, "I was there before you." He knocked again. The dog next door gave one single bark like it agreed things were off. When the officers came, his voice switched to pleading and then complaint. They told him to keep his hands where they could see them. He said he didn't do anything, that he was only getting what was his. He let them cuff him without a fight. I didn't recognize him. I don't know if I expected to. He looked like any man who'd been outside too much. Thin, a little sunburn across the nose, hair cut by guesswork. They took a statement, asked if I was okay, and if I had somewhere to go. I said I was fine. That wasn't true, but what else do you say? He told me the guy claimed he'd been sleeping there before I moved in. I didn't have a clever reply. I offered them water. They declined. The handyman came in the morning. He wore boot covers without being asked and smelled like drywall mud. He looked through the register, nodded once, and got to work. He cut back the lip, filled the void with insulation and something that looked like glittery foil, and sealed the seam. I signed the invoice and tipped him cash. He told me to keep the receipt in case the landlord wanted to reimburse. I slid it into a drawer and stared at it for a weirdly long time. That night, the apartment felt brand new and stale all at once. The smell was gone, mostly. There was still a hint of something when the room got hot, like it soaked into the paint and decided to stay as a souvenir. I primed the inside of the closet anyway. Cami came over with Thai food and talked about a client who wanted bangs in humidity season. A brave soul. We sat on the floor and ate from the cartons. We laughed at nothing just to hear it. When she left, she hugged me a little longer than usual and said she could stay. I said I'd be okay. Some of that was true. I moved the mason jar of tips to the freezer behind a bag of peas and a pint of vanilla. In case of burglars, I told myself, but really I just wanted to put something I worked for in a place that felt cold and solid. I put a rubber doorstop under my bedroom door before I slept. A silly triangle that couldn't stop anyone determined. It made my breathing slow down anyway. The officers said they'd put a patrol by for a while. The landlord said, "Wow," and "unbelievable," and then asked for photos. The closet is painted, sealed, and still feels like a mouth that has learned to keep secrets. I sleep, mostly. And when I don't, I stand in the hallway, listen to the radiator hiss and the neighbor's dog give that single bark, and try to remember which part of the night means morning is close. I bought a single-story ranch because it fit the spreadsheet. Palm trees and matching mailboxes. I work remote, so my days are columns and totals, not weather or people. The first week, the neighbor to my right introduced himself. Mid-40s, tan, wide-brimmed hat like a park ranger. Said his name twice. I lost it twice. Every morning when I took the trash out, he waved from his yard. It became part of my morning formula. Coffee, inbox, wave. 2 months in, I noticed he always stood in the same patch of grass. Feet planted, shoulders squared to my house. Never a step left or right. No smile, no good morning. I marked it as routine neighbor behavior and left it at that. One night, I saw him inside. His back window faces my bedroom. Lights on, curtains open, looking toward my side of the fence. No phone, no cooking, just watching. I told myself, people stare at nothing all the time. Accountants stare at spreadsheets. Maybe he was doing the mental version. Then on a Tuesday, the wave stopped. I stood there with the trash bin open, waiting for the gesture that would close the loop. Nothing. His car wasn't in the driveway either. I thought about the possibilities. Trip, illness, job change, death. That night, his motion light came on and stayed on. Around midnight, a police cruiser rolled up, lights off. 2 officers knocked, then split up. One walked the back, right past the window facing my room. I watched their shadows cross my blinds. Another car came. Locksmith. Door opened. Lights flipped on inside. Entry, hall, kitchen, like someone turning pages. A plainclothes guy arrived next. Gloves, clipboard. They carried out 3 boxes, no stretcher. The man set a manila folder on the hood of a car and began laying out photos. It took a few seconds to understand what I was seeing. My house in pieces. My bedroom window. My desk lamp glowing through the glass. My bedspread with navy stripes. The sad plant on the sill. Each shot from a slightly different angle. A sequence. I stayed inside, watched them pack everything and leave. His motion light clicked off. The grass patch went dark. A detective came a week later, asked if I'd ever had issues with the neighbor. I said no, unless you count consistency. Asked if I'd noticed him watching me. I said, not really. Asked if I felt threatened. I said, I don't know. All true. He said maybe it was a hobby. Then he cleared his throat like the word didn't fit. He suggested I get curtains. I ordered blackout ones that same hour. They trap heat, bad for Phoenix, but effective. I rearranged the bedroom so the bed no longer lined up with the window. If something could be seen, I wanted to control the angle. Days went back to normal, or the appearance of it. I worked, I ate, I logged expenses. 2 weeks later, the house went up for sale. A new detective called. Same questions. No answers. He didn't give me the neighbor's name, didn't tell me what they found beyond the photos. Said if I noticed anything unusual, I should reach out. I saved his number under Detective Phoenix. That night, I went outside to take out the trash. I looked toward that yard, empty, but my eyes found the window that faces mine. Even with the lights off, I could picture him standing there, perfectly aligned. That level of precision doesn't happen once. It takes testing. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I replay that night in my head. The officers at the door, the rectangles of light moving through the house, the folder opening on the hood. I remember how deliberate each photo looked, like he wasn't sneaking pictures, but recording data. Observation as routine. It's been months now. The new owners moved in, a couple who keeps their blinds closed most of the time. The motion light still flicks on randomly. Could be a cat, could be a sensor glitch. I logged the pattern for a week, but there was no clear trigger. My friends tell me to forget it, but forgetting doesn't match my wiring. You don't delete cells, you hide them. He'd figured out the one line where he could see into my room without being seen. That required planning, measurement, patience. I wonder if he started waving first or measuring first. The house feels fine. The curtains stay shut. But sometimes when the AC kicks on and the fabric stirs, I catch a 1-inch gap where the light slips through, enough to show a thin slice of his old kitchen window. I don't look long, just enough to confirm there's no one there. I litigate contracts. My job is to find the clause that saves you. When I bought my house, I read every line. Seller's disclosure? Normal. Lockbox history? Fine. Key exchange? Signed, dated, notarized. The realtor, mid-40s, polished, practiced smile, was forgettable in the way I like. I was having a tough week at the office and asked him to send someone to change the locks and deliver the house to me with the new keys. It's a 1960s single story in East Dallas. Smart floor plan, even light, switches where you expect them. I labeled breakers, stocked the pantry, set my desk by the window facing the street. Not joy, relief. After years of other people's chaos, I had possession. The first odd thing was nothing you could point at without sounding particular. I came home after a motion hearing to find the living room lamp on. The one I don't use, a brass spindle with a drum shade I keep for guests. My blazer was draped across the chair, with one sleeve over the seat, like it had been tried on, and a water glass sat left of the sink. I always set glasses on the right to keep the cutting board space clear. I corrected each one. Lamp off, blazer refolded, glass rinsed and moved. I told myself I'd been rushed that morning. I was not rushed that morning. I did a thorough and careful sweep of the house, but didn't find anything else out of place. That night, I ordered a camera. Nothing dramatic, just a discreet one that looks like a smoke detector. I mounted it above the bookshelf, aimed toward the entry and the living room, where every path in the house briefly converges. I didn't check the footage for 3 days. Work was heavy, and the habit of coming home and resetting small things became background noise. Thursday morning, I opened the app. The timeline scrolled with the neatness of a spreadsheet. Gray bars for nothing, blue marks for motion. A block of blue sat at 12:11 a.m. Thursday. I tapped it. The front door wasn't forced. It unlocked. A tiny quiver of the latch, then the door opened. And then came the part that made me feel nauseous. A man stepped in with a careful economy like he was avoiding squeaky spots he already knew. He closed the door softly, turned, and took off his shoes. He placed them side by side, toes aligned on the mat. He didn't pull out a phone. He didn't look around. He stood in the living room. I felt something sharp and small move through my chest, like a thought I couldn't hold still long enough to name. I'd been asleep, in the bedroom, down the hall. Door open, because I always slept with it open. I liked the air moving through. It made the place feel less lonely. And while I was in there, half buried in blankets, trusting locks and walls, This man was standing in the dark in the room where I keep my coat and keys and coffee mug. The idea didn't register as danger at first. It landed as confusion, then disgust, then something deeper that made the air around me feel wrong. I caught myself looking toward the hallway even as I watched the footage, expecting movement. He wasn't doing anything, and that somehow made it worse. He stood with his arms at his sides, head tilted slightly, like he was listening to the house breathe. Every so often, he turned toward the hallway that led to my bedroom and just faced it. No steps forward, no gesture, just a man-shaped pause aimed at where I slept. At almost 2 hours, he slid his shoes back on, opened the door, and left. When I leaned closer to the screen, the light from the camera caught his face for half a second. It was enough. It was my realtor. The same man who handed me the keys 6 months ago, all smiles and handshakes, telling me how safe this area was. That knowledge didn't arrive all at once. It spread, slow and heavy, like realizing the person you trusted to close your door had learned to open it again. I went through my closing emails, every attachment, every sentence. I found the line I'd forgotten. I'll keep a backup for emergencies. It helps if something goes wrong before you're fully moved in. It had sounded harmless back then. I'd thanked him for being thorough. Now I read it again, and all I could think was how easy it is for someone to call control a favor. For a long time, I just sat in silence, watching the freeze frame of his back turn toward the hallway. I realized that even after seeing the video, my body hadn't relaxed. It was as if my house wasn't a house anymore, just a container that had let someone in and hadn't told me. I called the non-emergency line and made an appointment to speak with an officer. I explained that I had camera footage of someone entering my home without consent. The dispatcher asked, "Was there any property damage?" I almost laughed. "No," I said. "He didn't break anything. That's the problem." I forwarded the footage to myself and printed stills with the timestamps, because paper is still how you make something feel like it exists. The next morning, I met with the officer. I handed him the flash drive with the video and printed stills of each frame that caught the man's face. He watched in silence. Then he paused it on the shot where the man faced the hallway and said, "You sleep that direction?" "Yes." "You recognize him?" I nodded. "My realtor." He didn't ask me if I was sure. The footage made that question irrelevant. He asked if I wanted to be there when they confronted him. I said yes. I wanted the record, but more than that, I wanted to look him in the eye and see what he looked like when he ran out of explanations. We met at the realtor's office 2 days later. The conference room had a framed poster that said something about home being a feeling, which landed sideways. The realtor walked in with the busyness of someone who thinks pace can outrun consequence. He looked at me, then at the officer, and tried to smile. I laid the printed stills on the table, each timestamp in neat black font. He started talking before anyone asked him to. Said he'd been doing routine security checks. Said there'd been break-ins in the neighborhood. He even tried to frame it as concern, like I should thank him. He had no emails, no contract addendum, no text messages, no consent form. The officer asked, "Why at midnight?" The realtor looked at the table. Silence did more than any speech could have. We filed the police report that afternoon. The realtor was charged with trespassing, along with a temporary restraining order and a formal complaint with the real estate board. I went home and replaced the smart lock with a manual one I could hear turn. I added a door bar and had every keyhole re-drilled. But that night, even with new locks and legal measures, the fear didn't dissolve. It just changed shape. Because no matter how many steps I took, I couldn't stop picturing that while I was asleep. My bedroom door open. A man I once trusted had been standing in my living room, listening to the quiet like it belonged to him. And that knowledge, more than the footage, more than the evidence, was the part that never really left. I buy houses other people walk away from. Nashville's full of them, flips with shiny paint over old bones. This one looked simple. 2-bedroom, crawl space foundation, new flooring that still smelled like glue. The inspector's report read, "No notable defects." I printed it, slipped it into my color-coded binder, and moved on. I manage rentals for a living, so I always have a headlamp, knee pads, pest traps in the truck. If something goes wrong, I fix it. If I can't fix it, I document it. That's how you keep the chaos out of your head. Not gonna lie, it began with something dumb. A vent, living room, low on the wall, right below a window. A return grill, bright white and clean. But the floor plan from the flipper showed only one return. In the hallway. This made 2. And outside, there were 4 foundation vents in the brickwork, not 5. I counted twice. The numbers didn't match. I bent down and looked closer. The screws were mismatched. 2 Phillips, 2 flathead. Rookie detail. Someone had worked on it fast. I grabbed the drill from the truck and backed them out. The grill popped off, leaving a dustless outline on the paint. Behind the ductboard was nothing. Just black air. No ductwork. No insulation. A gap that went deeper than it should. That bothered me. I've seen plenty of flips done in a hurry, but this felt different. I went to the crawl hatch in the utility corner. The flipper had left it clean, which is rare. I opened it and felt that familiar crawl space breath. Damp soil, old plastic, and something else, maybe chemical. I strapped on the headlamp and dropped down. At first, it was the usual: joists, pipes, a few cobwebs that looked fresh. Then the light hit something that shouldn't have been there. A mattress, thin and folded flat on plastic sheeting. Next to it, a half-pack of bottled water and a grocery bag with a receipt stapled to the handle. I picked it up. The date was yesterday. There was a small pile of folded mailers rubber-banded together, addresses from nearby streets, not mine. I traced a joist with the light, saw a line of charcoal scrawled across the beam. One word, written over and over: mine. I stayed crouched there longer than I should have, with the headlamp trembling a little on my forehead. It's not unusual to find signs of squatters in vacant houses. Usually you just call it in, patch it up, move on. But this didn't feel like leftovers. It felt like I'd walked into something current. I started backing out, slow. My plan was simple. Get out, call non-emergency, let the police clear it. Then I heard it. A small shift in the dark. Not a rat. Not the house. Weight moving across dirt. "Hello?" I said, calm, because tone matters more than words when you don't know who's listening. Silence. Then the soft drag of plastic shifting. "I'm leaving now," I said. "You're not in trouble. I'm backing out." A shape separated from the shadows. The headlamp found a man crouched near the utility line. A thin, gaunt figure, face pale under grime. His eyes caught the light like glass. "This is mine," he said. He wasn't shouting. He said it the way someone recites a fact. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. "I was here before the paint dried," he said again, louder. "You're trespassing." My voice came out calm, professional reflex. "Okay, I hear you. I'm leaving now." He stepped forward. My light caught the edges of his face, the streaks of dirt on his jaw. "You came into my room," he said. "You touched my things. You don't belong here." I kept my back toward the hatch and eased one knee at a time, careful not to trip over pipes. "I'm calling the police," I said. "I'm going outside now." The word outside seemed to set him off. His voice rose, ragged, furious. "You stole my house. You think you can take what's mine? I'll make it right." He took one more step. That was enough for me. I climbed up, pushed the hatch cover in place, and walked straight outside while dialing. I told the dispatcher I wasn't sure if he was armed, but he was inside the crawl space of my property, right now. She told me to stay back. I waited in the yard, keeping my eyes on the hatch. My headlamp still glowed down the gap, where the cover didn't fit flush. I could hear movement below, shuffling, breathing. I stayed on the line until the cruisers turned the corner. 2 officers arrived, flashlights out. They announced themselves and crouched by the hatch. The man came forward with his hands visible. His expression wasn't fear. It was disbelief. Like he couldn't understand how someone else's authority still applied to him. They cuffed him, coaxed him out, and led him to the car. He kept muttering that he'd been here before me, before anyone. The words, "before the paint dried," came out again and again. After they left, the quiet pressed in hard. One of the officers told me there had been previous calls tied to this address. A squat, then an eviction last year. The flipper's disclosure said vacant at close. I guess paperwork can lie too. I called the flipper and told him what happened. He just texted back. We had no issues during renovation. Maybe he came after. That was the kind of line you put in an email thread so it doesn't come back to haunt you later. I went to the hardware store, bought steel mesh, Tapcon screws, a door bar, and a small security cam. By midnight, I'd sealed every crawl entry and bolted plywood over the vent inside. Still, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I parked across the street in my truck and watched the camera feed on my phone. The frame showed the plywood hatch, the dirt floor, the edge of a plastic drop cloth I hadn't removed. The house looked hollow. Around 3:06 a.m., the motion alert buzzed. My thumb hit the app before I could think. The image came up grainy. Nothing had entered frame. No figure. No movement. When morning came, I checked the mesh. Everything held. No gaps, no pry marks. The smell still lingered. Plastic, candle wax, and damp earth. I'll still rent it out eventually. Someone will put a couch in that living room and hang curtains that don't match. And they'll never know what I saw. They'll think the house just needed some love. I'll hand them the keys, smile like I always do, and tell them the crawl space has been sealed. I won't mention the man, or the word on the joist, or the sound of the drop cloth moving without help. I'll keep the camera running for a few more weeks, just in case. And maybe, one of these nights, I'll drive by again and park under the same streetlight. Watch the feed. Listen to the silence. Wait for the house to take another breath. If this video left you checking your windows, wondering who else might have a key, you're not alone. Smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare, and tell me which story got under your skin the most. And if you think the scariest moments are over, think again. These next stories rattled even me. Click now to watch 4 disturbing stories that seriously freaked me out. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.